Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we're talking about, well, what you see in the title. When did it all go wrong? If you're in the camp that you believe this game is headed, well, the way of the dodo, or when did things start to change away from the original formula of the game is something you could also title this video. We'll talk about that point of view as well. But there's also going to be another part of the video that I want to talk about because it's something that doesn't really get mentioned too much in a lot of the discussion that I see with the current direction of the game, is that there is actually people that do like what's going on with the game and the new things that are being added in. Now, of course, most of us live probably in an echo chamber. You know, we surround ourselves with friends, or we watch content creators that are often saying the things that we like to hear, because we typically don't watch people that are saying things we don't want to hear, that we don't like. But as someone that produces daily content for World of Warships, I can tell you there are quite a few people that have spoken up in the comment section, just in my comment section, saying, hey, I like this. I like submarines. I like super ships. I like, this new line with this super gimmicky mechanic or things like that. So we're going to talk about that topic as well in today's video. But let's talk about the first topic at hand. When did it all go wrong, or when did it start to change in the direction that we have today? So, today's World of Warships. What's going on in today's World of Warships? Well, some of the biggest problems that you'll see in, well, my opinion from, of course, again, running a World of Warships YouTube channel, is that, 1, super ships are a thing. 2, submarines are a thing. 3, normal tech lines are getting super gimmicky. You can apply the same thing to premiums as well. Now, we are just talking about like game mechanics and ships and ship characteristics and ship designs and things like that. We're not talking about kind of the more business side of things. We've had several videos in the previous week talking about the more business side of things with the game, like the economy and things like that. We're just talking about ships and ship design and gameplay in this video. So that is some of the, well, those are some of the biggest issues with today's Warships. If you go around and just ask some of the older player base, or the player base that at least interacts a large part with, YouTube and the forums and Reddit and things like that, where I peruse for the community's commentary on the game. So when did this all start? When did it start to go in that direction? Well, super ships are very easy to narrow it down. We had a temporary super ship game mode that was presented to us as kind of a, well, what if naval design went in the direction, well, continued in the direction of, big gun surface ships, capital ships like battleships. It was a mode that many enjoyed because it was dumb, stupid fun. And then turns out Wargaming was really testing the idea of adding those ships into the game. Why? Well, I mean, we've talked about this beforehand, but there's only so many navies out there with unique ships. And unlike, World of Tanks, where many a nation has the resources to design a tank, not many nations have the resources to design, build, and, well, maintain a large navy, let alone a unique navy. Many a navy around the world, especially in the the time setting of this game, the early to mid 20th century, they were using hand-me-down ships, or they were buying ships from the major world powers like the British, the Americans, so forth and so on. So yeah, there's only so many designs you can pull from before you pretty much have the basics covered. Now, I myself don't believe we're to that point just yet, but apparently Wargaming wants to start to kind of prepare for that inevitability. So that's where we got super ships from. Submarines. Well, yeah, we were told we weren't going to get those. Again, those are easy to track down too. You can go back to a couple of years ago when submarines started to enter into very early testing. Then they went to public testing, and well, here we are today. But a bigger issue with the game and the overall direction that the game's been going in my opinion, and something that's a little bit harder to really narrow down, is the trend of the game to become just more and more and more and more gimmicky. And we're getting away from kind of the older designs of ships in the game where, you had a ship, had characteristics about it, and then that was it. It didn't really have any big gimmicks or anything like that. A stat here or there might be, of course it's going to be different, but might stand out above the rest in order to make it a little bit unique. Like, first off, let's talk about what is a gimmick. Now, a gimmick is something that's pretty hard to narrow down, because for me at least, it's kind of hard to put a fine line on this is a ship characteristic and this is a gimmick. Like, let's talk about the American AP. The Americans, in many of the ships in game, use the Super Heavy Mark 8 AP shell. That gives the American ships that have that shell better pin angles. They tend to hit a bit harder than guns of a similar caliber, because it's a super heavy AP shell. It's a heavier shell, so there is more mass there, more energy, so forth and so on. Science, physics, things like that. So naturally, that would of course give that shell better pins, more damage, and things like that. And of course, it also tends to lead to slower velocities, like we talked about with the American battleships, as I've said many a time on this channel. Their AP is incredibly slow. It takes it a hot minute to get to the target at range because it's a super heavy AP shell. It's a heavy shell. So that's a characteristic in my mind. A gimmick in my mind would be something like main battery reload booster, where it's kind of less based in reality and it's more on the arcadey side of things. Now, this is a very arcadey game. I don't mind that it's an arcadey game. In fact, I believe that because it does have a lot of arcadey elements to it, that's what makes it a lot more playable. And if you want my further details on that, or my further thoughts on that, you can go watch my Warships versus War Thunder naval video. I kind of delve into that much deeper in that video. So like main battery reload booster, the button where you magically push it and then suddenly your gunners have half the reload time that they had beforehand. And other things too, like the new auto loading, or what do they call them, the special firing mode or alternative firing mode, whatever they call it now, where like with the Pan American cruisers, that whole line has that gimmick now, where when you fulfill X requirement you get X bonus. Like, well, let's use the super ships for the example, because that's where that comes from. Like with the Satsuma, you land so many shells in the vicinity of your target, now your gunners have a much more accurate dispersion on the next salvo, which that one I can kind of buy, because it's kind of like you're walking your shells in. I can buy that. But then you have these other ships where once you fulfill that initial threshold, you get something like a 3-round burst, or your AP suddenly becomes a lot more better. And I mean, too, you could also throw in things like the French damage saturation, where it's extremely exaggerated because the ship gets saturated faster. There's a much more exaggerated damage saturation there, where the ship essentially takes less damage. I guess you could say, in my mind at least, gimmicks are much more exaggerated than characteristics. And I mean, it's just something that leads to an issue of like, we gotta out gimmick the current gimmick with a new gimmick with some of these new lines, like again with the Pan American cruiser line. So where did this all start from? Well, in my humble opinion, you can trace this back to, in my opinion at least, and again, I'm making this video because I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this too, so feel free to add to this, disagree with me if you want to. The British battleships, in my opinion, is where we really started to get a lot more gimmicky things from there on out. Now, the British battleships have one super gimmicky thing about them. Of course, if you play the Lion and the Conqueror can literally reprint their HP back. Now, so the first time we've got this heal in the game, of course, that was given to the Minotaur beforehand. And, I mean, yeah, it's been a thing. But now you're giving a battleship the ability to just print itself back. On top of that, too, you have God tier HE. You had the concealment of a cruiser on the Conqueror. So you had just this amalgamation of super gimmicky things bolted to one ship, and it was the best ship in the game for a very long time. It took them forever to nerf the thing. And even still today, it's like one of the best battleships for the meta. It's fantastic in today's meta. You just sit back, HE spam. You can eat damage on the chin, and it doesn't really matter because you got a lull heal. I mean, yeah, sure, if you overextend and you're getting pounded on by 6 ships, you're going to go down. But I mean, again, for today's meta, it's like the perfect thing. And if you take a look back at the lines that came out after that, it's not like, we got super gimmicky things right away, but we just started getting, a little bit more gimmicky lines here and there. And then, here's some sap, a new ammunition type, and exhaust smoke generator, which again is still on the more realistic side of things. But if you look at the lines we get nowadays, it's like, oh man, we've kind of really snowballed from having a battleship with a super heal and good HE to now where we have these ships that have the gimmicks from the super ships in their tech lines. Now, in my opinion, you could very strongly argue that in a game like World of Warships that is an arcade game, you're naturally going to have more and more arcadey things get added to the game as time goes on. There's kind of two ways you can look at this. One way you can look at the more historical side of things for the game because, well, naval design, construction, and upkeep, it's expensive. It's not like World of Tanks where they have many tanks that they can pull from. Many domestic design tanks, I should say, from the respective home countries that they can pull from before they have to start kind of, making up stuff or making clones. It's not really the same when it comes to ships. Designing ships, constructing them, maintaining them, it's very expensive. So if you look at, especially the time period that this game takes place, early to mid 20th century, there's many navies around the world whose fleets are made up of either hand-me-down ships from some of the larger countries, or their ships built under contract from those larger countries that they just bought and put into their own fleets. So it's a bit more difficult for the devs over here at World of Warships to truly make unique things. So you have to, kind of bend the rules and, add this mechanic here or this here. I mean, look at all the Fletchers in game and the various tweaks that they've done to those ships to make them more unique. And there's also the other way you can look at it in the terms of modern free-to-play games, because this is a free-to-play game. You don't have to pay anything at all to play this game, and I know quite a few players that haven't put a single dime into this game, and good on you for that. Now, the game has to do two things. It's got to make money, and it's got to bring in new players. Is it making money? Yeah, it is. It is. I'm sure we're all aware that it's making money. 2, is it bringing in new players? Yeah, I would say so. You might be thinking, well, Sealor, the player numbers are on a downward spiral. Well, 2 things about that. First off, it's the summer. If you look at the natural fluctuation of the player numbers, that's what happens in the summer. People aren't going to school. They're not staying at home as much anymore. They're going out and about and traveling. So naturally during the summertime, at least on the North American server, the player numbers do dip down. 2, the numbers aren't like crashing if you look at them. They're, again, about where you would see the normal fluctuation at the moment. They're not way down because new players are coming in, believe it or not. They're coming in at what appears to be at least just the same rate that older players are leaving, because I see lots of comments saying, I've quit playing or haven't played since yada yada yada. So people are leaving if they're being truthful in their comment section, and they're not logging into the game anymore and getting in those active player numbers. So there are new players coming in that, again, if the comments that are left all over here, the forums of Reddit, are to be believed, or at least replacing the people that are outgoing. They're not outpacing that rate, but they're at least keeping up with it. So again, that's why I say at the end of this year, I think we'll get a better idea of where the player numbers are going to be at in the future. So it is doing that at the moment. And in order to do that, you got to change things in today's world. People have incredibly short attention spans in today's world. At least younger people do. And, well, you need to bring in younger people to play your game if you want your game to have a future. So it is successfully doing that. And going back to what I was saying with new things, you gotta do new things. You gotta shake it up in order to draw in new players. And if you look at other larger, more successful free-to-play titles, they have to do this. And they've done it quite successfully. And as much as I hate what I'm about to say, you can look at Fortnite for a pretty good example of that. Fortnite's whole thing, years ago when it got big, is that it's a battle royale where you can build stuff. You know, you can build your own cover, and that was a huge thing. And people got really freaking good at it, and you can shoot at a guy, and he builds a freaking 5-star hotel, resort, and water park in like 5 seconds. Alright? That was Fortnite's thing over like PUBG, when it was Fortnite versus PUBG. You know, you could build in Fortnite, it's a bit more casual and things like that. And then, a little while ago, they introduced no build, where you can't build anymore. And that brought in a whole bunch of people. I was seeing people all over social media, on YouTube, on Twitch, going back to Fortnite or going to Fortnite for the first time because there's no build now. And you don't have to worry about the guy building, you know, the 4 seasons in front of you when you take a shot at him. And that brought in a bunch of people to Fortnite, and Fortnite's still going strong. And it's just, you know, think about the situation when you're one of those Fortnite players that, of course, you know, you like the building aspect, and now, you know, no build's super popular. Yeah. You can kind of put, you know, just think about some of the comments you see here. Oh, back in my day, we could build stuff. And just like, you know, back in my day, we didn't have submarines or whatever. Things like that. It's kind of funny to think about that. Another thing, too, you might be thinking, well, Sealord, all my friends, they're saying the same things about the game. They're complaining about the game, yada, yada, yada. Well, that's kind of the echo chamber effect. If you know, stick around people that think the same as you, your very close friend group, I mean, you probably don't really listen or watch either YouTubers or streamers that are saying, oh yeah, I like submarines, I love submarines, I love super ships. If you don't like that, you're probably not sticking around on their stream or on their channel all that much, so you got a bit of the echo chamber effect going on there. And there's a very large percentage of the player base that they don't watch YouTube, they don't watch Twitch, they don't go on the forums, they don't go on the subreddit. They just hop on their funny little boat game, they play maybe 4 or 5 battles a day, if that, and then they log off. That's what they do. And that's a very good chunk of the player base. That's just a matter of fact. So there is that to consider as well. So I think I'll end my ramblings there, guys. I just had this thought come to me when I was driving home on my way from work. I was thinking about, you know, the upcoming Pan-American cruises and how far we've come to have a freaking Tetline have the alternative firing mode or whatever they're calling it nowadays. And I was just trying to think back to like, well, man, when did all this really first start? And, you know, thought about the Conqueror, then I thought about, you know, how the game's going and how there are people that do enjoy the game, well, they have said so in at least my comment section. But yeah, just let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Just want to pick your brain. I've shared my thoughts. Now let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday and wonderful rest of your week if you don't hear from me before then. And hope to catch you guys in the next one.